Welcome adventurers! This is D&Delver, and today we will delve into the absolute mechanical basics of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So, you've decided to enter the magical world of Dungeons & Dragons. You go to build your very first character, you have a clear idea in your mind. It could be a barbarian orc that's meant to be very imposing and intimidating, or maybe an artsy gnome bard that just wants to spread their art throughout the continent. But then you run into all those technical terms and words like ability scores, modifiers, AC, DC, cantrips, saving throws, attack rolls. Yeah. Despite the fantastical roleplay and story-focused appeal of the game like Dungeons & Dragons, there is so many terms and numbers that get thrown at you straight away without any preparation whatsoever that it is very easy to get overwhelmed immediately, especially when you're a new player. So today we will go through all of those, choose all of the most important ones and talk you through them so that you are completely ready to get into the fun part of the game. So without further ado, let's get going. First, we will start with things you should already be familiar when creating your character. Abilities and skills. Your character is defined by 6 primary abilities, which are then further divided into specific skills. Now, the 6 primary abilities are Strength. This represents how physically strong your character is, and determines your carrying capacity, damage with melee and thrown weapons, as well as grappling, and the athletics skill. Dexterity represents how agile and good with their hands character is, as well as how good the reflexes are. This affects your initiative, your armor class, damage with ranged and finesse weapons, as well as skills of acrobatics, sleight of hand, and stealth. Constitution represents how resilient the character is. This directly affects the health points you gain at each level. Intelligence represents your character's memory, attention to detail, as well as their investigation and deduction abilities. It determines your arcana, history, investigation, nature, and religion skills, as well as the spellcasting ability of wizard and artificer classes. Wisdom represents the character's senses and intuition. It determines your animal handling, insight, medicine, perception, and survival skills, as well as the spellcasting ability of clerics, druids, and rangers. Charisma represents your character's presence and confidence. It determines your deception, intimidation, performance, and persuasion skills, as well as the spellcasting ability of bards, sorcerers, warlocks, and paladins. Overall, this means that the skill you will prioritize will depend on your idea for the character and the class that you've chosen for them. For example, if you want to be a hulking brute just going straight through the enemies and fighting right at the front lines, you will probably want to prioritize your strength and maybe put some points into constitution. If you want to take more of a sneaky approach or maybe attack with a bow or a crossbow from a distance, you'll probably want to focus on being dexterity based. Constitution is sort of a universal one where it's good for every character, but usually you don't want to make it your primary skill since it only really affects your health points and resilience. Then you'll want to put your points into intelligence if you're thinking of being something like a detective or an investigator, or maybe just someone who's very book smart and knowledgeable in general. Wisdom will come into play if you're thinking of like a survivalist or a nature-based character, or someone who's very observant and aware of their surroundings. And then charisma will come into play if you're thinking of maybe deceiving some people or impersonating someone else, or you just very good at talking your way out of any situation, or talking other people into doing what maybe you don't really want to do, or you'd rather someone else puts themselves at risk instead. So now, once you've decided which ability you'd like to prioritize, the next step will be finding out what an ability score and an ability score modifier is, and how to assign those. Ability score is the number you assign to your ability, with the score of 10 being considered average and 20 being the peak of what a person can achieve by natural means. Your ability modifier is derived from your ability score, and it represents the effect that the score has on your skills. The modifier is at 0 when your ability score is 10, and then it changes by 1 for every 2 points above or below that, as presented in this table. Now on to actually assigning the ability scores. There are 3 ways of assigning those, but since this is a beginner's video, we will focus on the standard array. This array just gives you a set of 6 numbers that you can assign freely, 1 for each ability. The other 2 options are point by or rolling for your stats. Proficiency and expertise. When creating a character, you get to choose what sort of things they're proficient with. Proficiency means that you add your proficiency bonus to any d20 tests while using skill, weapon, or tool that the character is proficient with. This proficiency bonus starts at +2, and as you go up in levels, it goes all the way up to +6. Some classes and feats can grant you expertise with specific skills, which means that in any checks to do with those, you add your proficiency bonus twice. Weapons and armor. Your class determines your weapon and armor proficiencies. Weapons are sorted into melee and martial weapons, and the weapon you wield determines the dice you roll for damage when you hit an enemy with them. Armor is sorted into light, medium, and heavy armor, and it helps boost your armor class. Your armor class determines how difficult the character is to damage with an attack, and is calculated from a mix of your dexterity modifier and the armor you're wearing. Now this should be everything that you need to know to create your character, but let's get on to some of the gameplay terms that you should know. Dice, d20 tests, and difficulty class. Typical dice sets include 7 dice, a d4, d6, d8, d10, d12, d20, and a percentile dice. Each dice's name refers to the number of sides that the die has. The main way of determining what happens in a game of Dungeons & Dragons is through d20 tests. A d20 test involves rolling the d20 dice and then adding the appropriate modifiers. The d20 tests are used for all attack rolls, saving throws, and ability checks. Every d20 test will have a set difficulty class, usually determined by your DM, which they may or may not disclose to you before you roll. Every d20 test can also be rolled at either advantage or disadvantage. Advantage means that you roll the d20 twice and take the higher result, while disadvantage means that you roll it twice but take the lower one. Now on to combat. The most important terms that you will need to know in combat will be your initiative. This determines what order everyone goes into when they get into combat. Your initiative is determined by rolling a d20 dice and then adding your dexterity modifier to it. The attacks and effects in combat come in 2 ways, attack rolls and saving throws. To make an attack roll, you roll a d20 and add appropriate modifiers, and the total needs to either match or beat the creature's armor class. With the saving throws, however, it's the creature that is being affected that rolls the d20 and adds the appropriate modifiers, and then if they either match or beat the difficulty check set by said effect, they can lessen or avoid the effect entirely. During combat in every round, everyone gets a single turn. During your turn, you get 1 action, 1 bonus action, and your movement to use as you please. As well as that, you get 1 reaction per round that resets every time you start your next turn. Now that we've done with combat, let's see about resting and patching up those wounds. A short rest is when you take a 1-hour break and then you get to use your hit dice to heal yourself up a bit. Long rest is 8 hours of uninterrupted rest that recovers all of your health, spell slots, and hit dice. Your hit dice itself has its size determined by the class that you're playing, and the number of the dice that you can use throughout the day is determined by your level. The final section will be spells and spell slots. Specific classes have access to specific spell lists, and those spells are divided into cantrips and leveled spells. Cantrips are relatively easy spells that don't have any limitations on how much you use them. Leveled spells are more powerful magic. They are divided into 9 levels, and to cast a spell you need to have a spell slot of a matching or higher level than the spell you are casting. The spell slots are obtained by gaining levels in specific classes, and are all regained on long rests. So this should be all of the terms that you need to know to play Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I hope this video helped you. Let me know in the comments below. Until next time.